at Northerly's core, is purpose and happiness is at our foundation, and that's what we're sort of subscribing to as a company. And we hope that through our values and our practices, that we can make a positive impact on the people that we come across, through our journey. So a little bit on the how is choosing projects that align with our passions. So each of us are with our kind of varied background but overlapping slightly, we want to work on projects that are interesting to us and that keep us thinking. So and then sticking to the economics of why. So the economics of why we started Northerly, as well as the understanding that in Peoria we don't need 200 plus K salaries a year here, and we can make these economics work with sort of also being kind of picky on projects that we choose to work on. And one that you'll see in the pipeline of Northerly is giving ideas room to grow. So giving our own ideas room to grow as well.
So we talked a little bit about kind of why we've existed as an organization and kind of what our primary purpose is and how some of the how of being selective with projects, how we're going to kind of keep that as front and center. We'll now talk about kind of what we do as an organization. So we have kind of the long-term vision, which is gets a little bit more towards some of those things that Matt talked about, and Blake's going to talk a little bit about some of those things. But in the short term, we are going to provide some services that are focused on helping businesses grow. But those three categories, it really falls into three categories, and the three categories here are web and app development, mobile app development. So creating really beautiful user-centric apps that use kind of the latest industry standards for coding and technology. Helping businesses with strategy consulting, whether that's large organizations with operations problems or analytics, or even smaller organizations that even a startup that's trying to figure out its launch strategy, or even doing mergers and acquisitions, kind of an array of kind of business strategy consulting. And lastly, kind of research and development, which would be kind of helping larger organizations also innovate in new ways, kind of when a medium or small or large organization has an idea or a hypothesis they want to test, but they don't know if it's going to work yet, but they need to try to kind of try it out and create a proof of concept. We're going to try to help innovate and create kind of solutions on the go and do so quickly to reduce their costs. So I'll pass to Blake. He'll talk a little bit more about some of the longer term stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, with that kind of being our launch plan, some of the further out and in the pipeline ideas we've been kind of tossing around since day one, both really stem from a few books that you'll really come across very often in the startup world, being the first one being The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and the second one being Startup Communities by Brad Felt. So this first kind of vision that we had for longer term plans was the idea of a startup studio, and that's more or less service work that kind of bootstraps product development and internally developing startups. So doing as much as we can to really remove these elements of uncertainty in startup building. So one example being kind of, again, service work will bootstrap our internal development. So we have our funding cycle kind of built in. And iterating quickly on ideas, that's kind of, again, Lean Startup 101 is testing your ideas quickly, getting user feedback early. And then if the ideas aren't really picking up traction, you kind of move on to the next one. And again, you have that service work there to kind of fall back on as a startup studio. And then this third one here is kind of like a 60-40. We're kind of trying to prescribe ourselves to 60% of our work or focus is going to be on service work. The other 40% we're going to try to devote to this product development and working with startups. So then the second book reference kind of being the startup community. A couple of the core tenets that kind of goes over here being give before you get. So we obviously would like to get ourselves engaged with the community a lot. And I think that can break down into some ideas we tossed around being like classes, workshops, open office hours, just whatever we can do to start being involved with the community here. Everyone is a mentor, and being open to ideas, those kind of go together. Like we have some pretty strong ideals and values that we're trying to push for ourselves, and really kind of open for collaborating and being challenged on those, as well as learning from the community as much as we can help the community. So those are kind of the two sides of what's in the pipeline too. Yeah, and that's kind of where we're at. There's still a lot of way to go for us. There's a few ways to connect with us there: Twitter at We Are Northerly, and our website, and then hello@wearenortherly.com if you want to email us. So yeah, any questions, we'd be happy to answer some.
Hi, Doris. Yeah.
Doors, yeah. You know, it's difficult for small business owners to start up, as you know that. So I guess my question to you is, in regards to marketing as a project for your own company, what are some of the things right off that you're going to do to let people know that you exist in a large community in central Illinois?
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to do the same thing. So what fantastic things have you strategized together as three of you that you're going to do?
1 million cups is one of them.
Well,
Obviously. A lot of it starts with, we're kind of been thinking about like a soft launch approach, which is, you know, our personal networks of past relationships that we've done. We all have kind of freelance work or clients that we've worked with in the past that individually we all have relationships with, and we can use that as a starting point for a soft launch. That's kind of been our first approach. Long term, definitely some of the things that Blake talked about with classes and workshops, we're trying to kind of envision and position as some ways of basically giving to the community, but also getting our name out so that people recognize, and it's kind of a, you know, the more you give, the more you get back, and that's kind of our philosophy. And I'm sure there's more to it if you guys want to add any, but yeah.
Yeah, there's, without saying too much, there's, we're looking at local data that's available as well, and what sort of kind of interesting maybe visualizations we can do with local information and that to sort of kind of allow us and others to sort of kind of glean from as well. That may, you know,
Yeah.
it may be sexy in a way that gives us some attention. I don't know. You know, we'll kind of see what comes out of that. But yeah.
So how do you differentiate yourself from others that are doing something similar? And what's the target size of the employer or the people that you want to work with?
Yeah.
There's a couple points. The startup world in Peoria is still growing, I'd say. So there isn't a large focus on purely startups as one point of differentiation. Many of the shops will focus on the larger businesses. So we're really trying to position ourselves as startup friendly and really be there on the ground floor with people who are trying to launch something from scratch. So that's one point of differentiation. And really, in general, when you look at a more national scale, you know, we are looking at kind of a regional approach to marketing ourselves. And it's very often the case that kind of the middle of the country gets overlooked on that kind of stuff. But it's interesting because as there becomes an increased amount of activity on the coasts, a lot of people are actually looking for opportunities in places like the Midwest, whether it's it's just so saturated on either sides of the coast that actually there's more attention towards what do these places have as strengths, so that the startup communities are, I think, starting to burgeon in these other places that have been previously overlooked. And then I think there's other aspects of when we apply our skill sets to medium and large size companies. So one is our experience and our background. We like to think that we have enough to offer that is attractive to clients. Really, when you're hiring service-oriented companies, you're hiring people who have seen problems before and that know how to address those problems. And we like to think that we can do that in an effective way. So. Yeah,
this is in regards to salary You know, it's difficult when you have one person with yourself that you have to pay. But
Yeah.
when you have 3 people in the company, what's my question? How are you going to assess which ones you're going to take so all 3 of you get paid?
So when you say take, do you mean
Right.
projects? Which projects we're gonna get
Yes.
take? So
You know, because you got 3 bodies here
Yeah.
that needs to be,
yeah,
that needs money. So
yeah. We all need to eat.
$500 or 20,
Yeah.
well, maybe $20,000 projects, 3 or 4 of those would be okay. But
Yeah. So I don't want to answer all these questions, but I'd say we have an approach where we're in this together, all 3 of us, and collectively we determine which projects is going to work for the best. If the question is how do you assess, how do you get enough income, you just choose the larger projects. I guess is one of the answers. But if there's not the larger projects, what happens? Hopefully that doesn't happen. I'll let you know if it does. But yeah, I mean, the paying 3 bodies is just a function of just making the economics work for, maybe one person's not billable on a certain project and another one is, and so you kind of pay, even out in the long term. I think is how we're kind of approaching it. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. It doesn't seem like it does from the look on your face.
oh, you read my face. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about it because it's that's difficult.
Yeah.
When you have 3 people into it. Now, when you have 2, it's kind of like okay.
Yeah.
But when you get to be 3, unless
Yeah.
the revenue is coming in and.
I think it mostly is just a function of like the stronger you can be as a team, and just having the we're all supporting ourselves. We've all basically jumped ship and quit our previous jobs, and we know we're all in here, and we know that it's a kind of a collective sharing of our future projects, and knowing that we're gonna all participate equally in it. It's kind of been our
You said
approach.
you had a long list of values for your company, but you didn't identify those. What were those values? Like core values, responsibility and excellence,
Well,
community of service. What are your values?
We were trying to kind of go ahead.
Yeah, we didn't want to do a dump of them, but we've all been impacted by certain writings and certain ways of doing business, and I think of at least certainly in my past and probably in their past as well. Been in situations where transparency hasn't always been upfront, and so we from internally, and we're looking at I proposed a way to these guys the other day of how we can be a bit more transparent externally too, and we stretch each other there a little bit. So as far as being open and transparent and as a default, internally. So it's easy to say now because we're all 3 co-founders, right? But when we bring people in, keeping that, also trying to keep it as flat as possible. So when we bring people in, we don't, we want their ideas to influence the way that we do business just as much as ours. So making key hires, it's going to be important for that, and getting people that are like-minded. But so being open and transparent is sort of at the forefront, being honest and realistic timelines and expectations with clients. I'm really against crunch. I've worked for other shops before where it's been crunch to get this done, and sometimes your best work comes out of that, and sometimes a lot of other things suffer during that time. So and having a very solid kind of work-life balance in there too is something that we feel like we can do here in the Peoria area, where that may be kind of harder on the coast. So really offering that to our employees. So those are all things that we're focused on, and there's a laundry list of more, but yeah.
I think one more that just might help, that they were both kind of alluding to, that might help address one of your earlier questions too, is just this idea of like people over profits. I think all of us going into this with the expectation we're not really in this for the money, we're more in it for the people, and just that helps set the expectations too for like project work or when income is more fluctuating, and obviously we need to take on different types of projects right now than we might in a year, but just having that expectation that we're all on the same page, and we're not really in this just for the money kind of really helps even things out too. So.
Yeah, and I think and that goes to with, you know, our passions being kind of the number one, and that's kind of why we decided to try to boil it to one slide list of values here, which is, you know, even as we hire future employees, we don't anticipate putting anybody on a project that they don't want to be on. We would rather ask them, like, what work are you passionate about, and then we'll go find that particular project and we'll figure out a way to sell it. So it's kind of reversing. It's not taking whatever's there. It's just it's going after what people are really excited about, and that makes you excited to go to work, makes you, you know, more productive, and you can you know, it just makes life better. So that's kind of what we want. Yeah.
So one of your goals was that you give before you get. And then you just said people before profits. And I think those are two fantastic goals and motivations. But they come from two different sort of things that push you in that direction. One would be professional. You've read things and you see that that's a great business practice, and there's nothing wrong with that. The other is from a personal motivation. It's how you're wired. And I'm just curious, are you pursuing these things because you see it's a good business practice, which is fine, or is it because of how you're wired?
I don't think we, if we weren't wired this way, we wouldn't have, I think, jumped ship from, you know, fairly secure jobs to go after this. So, at least personally, you know, I feel that I'm very wired that way. So I've been an educator for 8 years, and I love teaching, and I've always given, you know, seen that as a way to give, and you know, how can we, you know, for me the answer is how can I turn that attention but towards a company, and then also towards a community. So you know, getting really involved with, you know, the existing community, startup community here in Peoria, and giving, you know, that my attention as well. So
Yeah, I
these
think
guys.
personally, I mean, it's something that you grow over time, and your opinions change over time. You know, I think there's certainly a time in my life where I wasn't hardwired that way, but after, you know, some of my experiences at my past employer, and, you know, having to, there's a price you pay for the higher salary, for, you know, working 60-hour, 70-hour weeks, and there comes a point where you realize, I just had my second daughter, you know, that family, you want to spend more time with your family, and time is the most valuable asset you have. So, you know, it's a learning process, but I think it definitely is hardwired into us that this is kind of the route we want to go now, that we're wanting to prioritize kind of our passions and time over kind of getting a higher paycheck or doing what may be fiscally or, you know, the best business logic all the time. So I think that's my personal answer, but yeah.
And I think either motivation is good, but I think you'll have a much better chance of sustaining that if it's coming from an internal place rather than a professional paradigm.
Yeah, yeah, great, thank you.
I hear that all three of you have computer backgrounds. Are you mainly wanting to focus on clients who likewise have software-related products?
Yes. We will be we will deliver software solutions, and, you know, as well as, you know, consulting, kind of everything around that as well. So yes. to answer your-
And
That's-
just to clarify, what I mean by that is a lot of people have a business, but the computer part of it is only a means of delivering something. It's not the product itself. It's not a new app, or it's not a, you know.
Yeah.
So are you focusing on, by that, do you mean you're focusing on clients whose product is the app or is the computer-related?
That's a good question.
Not solely.
Yeah, I would say very aligned with what the second statement you made, which is, you know, there are many companies that that software permeates so many businesses nowadays, whether you're making large equipment or frankly, even if you're a farmer, there's software can run the gamut. Software can help any business. So it's really the application of that to the business that we can bring something to. So I would say it's agnostic to what the end thing that the business makes, but that software can help in some form help many different businesses. And I'd say the ones that we're focusing on are probably regional strengths of Peoria. We have talked about kind of agriculture as something we might be interested long term, but certainly other players that you would think about in Peoria might be others. But pairing that with, of course, kind of our desire to do some startup works as well, which may have a different focus. But
Okay, then my second follow-up question is, for those where the main product really isn't computer software products to begin with, I think one of the biggest challenges for startup companies is to get through that product development and the whole marketing branding thing. And then you can say, once that's defined, then you can turn your computer people loose and say, okay, let's figure out a way to deliver this.
Yeah.
So are you prepared to also assist these startup companies who are kind of floundering around with their marketing and branding? Or if not, when they come to you, who are you going to point them to? Because that almost has to be decided before they turn you loose.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the startups I've worked with, like in the Startup Accelerator over the past 2 summers, they're mostly tech products, but there's still obviously a huge part of that is marketing and getting your product out there ahead of time. The easiest answer to that is have a conversation, and we'll see if there's any overlap in how we can help, or we can point you in the resources in the right direction. My quick answer and suggestion would be kind of focus. Shotgun approach to marketing and stuff like that is always very difficult. If you find one kind of network or marketing avenue that works, you're going to really want to stick after that and go after it hard. You can see up here we only put Twitter for our social network. That's kind of one example. If we focused on too many social networks and 3 or 4 of them, it's just harder to kind of deliver the same amount of value to your end user if you shotgun approach it. So it's kind of the quick answer to it.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a set process or steps? So if I hit you up on Twitter and I'm interested in doing this, what's the process coming in the door, and as a new client, what can I expect from that?
I would say there's not any set processes yet because we're about 2 weeks old. So we kind of have processes individually for different problems, but it kind of depends on the problem that you're facing. We probably have some processes for approaches we'd taken to, depending on whether you're trying to launch a startup. So
yeah, and I think that's a good answer, because one process isn't going to work for everything. So taking your idea through a set, like it's really, we would probably have set goals that we would like to see, like your product make, but we would want to have a simple conversation to figure out, what are those, and then
Step 1 is weeding out crazy people like me.
maybe.
So, yeah. So no, we don't have a central solution that's going to be the answer for everything.
Yeah. Yes.
So for the startup community, if somebody approaches you with a startup idea, how do you price that?
Yeah.
How do you require payment? Are you taking equity as part of payment?
We don't have a set process yet. It's kind of, we'll kind of see as it comes. We're certainly willing, and we've talked with some startups already about doing kind of an exchange of equity for service and arrangement. There's other arrangements that can be done. There's all sorts of various models that we can use, but that's one of them. We would quantify the amount of quantify the price of the service we would give you if we were just paying cash, and then we can figure out what the equity value would be if it's an idea that both parties like. It's kind of one of those case by case too, because it's a lot more work to kind of do that type of an arrangement. So the fit's got to be perfect. But there's some other arrangements that we're considering in the future too that may be a little bit simpler and streamlined, and where I think we're still working on what that might look like in the future. But if equity for service is one option, kind of there's an incubator model that's another option, which is kind of you gather in a larger number of candidates all at once, and then basically they compete for slots, and then the top 3 to 5 win. And that's not a model we've worked out and that we're definitely going to do yet, but it's another type of model that exists out there. And so it kind of we're kind of still letting it evolve over time. So to start with, we're just start with a conversation and see what the needs of the idea is. See where that idea is. If it's just an idea, of course, it's going to have a different stage than if it's very mature, has revenue already, and has some existing software already. Those are 2 very different business models, different businesses. So yeah, so it depends is the consultant answer. Yeah.
Have you guys built anything in React, or what types of code bases do you like to manage?
Yeah, I've been playing with React a little bit lately. To talk tech for a bit. I started out in like a Python stack out in the Seattle job, moved to full stack JavaScript. It's kind of where I live these days, including a lot of React and some Ruby on Rails stuff for another client I worked for. So kind of the big 3 right there that I have a background in.
Yeah. We could go, I guess, through each of ours, but I have a little bit of Python as well, and a little bit of R. Most of mine is more kind of towards the business and statistics, so less kind of computer science oriented and more statistics oriented. But Python and R are probably the 2 that I'm starting to gravitate. And I know Matt has a long list too. So
Yeah, I want to get into my list, but I do a lot of native development, so whether it's Android or iOS, and again, I mean, C, C++, Java. I mean, there's to me the language needs to match with the problem, right? So bring a problem to the table, and we'll figure out what is that best solution to get that done. So.
Yeah.
Thank you
Going?
guys so much
All right.
for being here. Can you tell everybody what we can do to help Northerly with their progress?
Sure. I think the main thing is just connect with us on social media. If you engage with us on questions, if you have ideas, or if you would like to know more information about what we may be doing in the future. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, or to spread the word. If you know people that are looking for work to be done, spread our name.
Yeah.
Work to.
And suggestions on more events like this we can go to, or
Yeah.
just again hit us up on social if you want to have a conversation. I'm sure we'd all love to chat, just start up and nerd out for a bit. So
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Coffee, please.
Thank you. Thank you.